data exchange. So anything you wanted to know about the Transportation Alternatives Program through the Federal Highway Administration, there's a multi-state listings of everything since its origination in the early 1990s. There's the webinar. Maybe you all had a chance to take a look at that. Obviously, you're listening in here today, but we provided the FHWA March 30th guidance. There were a series of slides, and there was a webinar. And again, folks are welcome, definitely, since the TAP program, in unison with the Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Organization, or WMAPCO, they are suballocated some funds, well, not some funds, about, I don't know, maybe 1/5 of the program to make the project decisions where the TAP projects may be in Newcastle County. And the contact person is Heather Dunnigan, who's actually participating, as well as 2 other office staff from WMAPCO. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So we are recording this, so we will actually post my voice, Kelly's voice, Chip's voice, and your all voices. So just to make disclaimers well known. Okay. So where are we at? Next.
All right, ready for the next one?
Yeah. So again, we'll just say this is not necessarily a public workshop. This is kind of a meeting for you all with interest in the TAP program. But again, we're required, since we're kind of doing this from the general public, is that we got to list DelDOT's mission, every trip, every mode, every dollar, everyone. This is another requirement which we're allowed to, or which we're supposed to do. This is listing the safety factors. This is as of 2 days ago. Again, we have to list fatalities mentioned, and again, from Delaware residents or non-residents, and where they stand to date with vehicles, pedestrian, or bicyclists. So the stats are there, and unfortunately, they're a little bit higher than where they were 2021. So that's as of 2 days ago. All right.
And then I'll take over and give Mike a little break from talking. So just to give you some background on the program this year, it hasn't been this way in years past, but we are doing the project submissions on a competitive basis. So we will be taking in everybody's and reviewing them to a set standard and some metrics that we're going to share with you today. We do have some change in our coin purse to share with you all, though. So thanks for joining into the call. We're really excited to get all this money out and on the road or the trails or bike paths, as it were, because we want to really see some good projects come to fruition in the next few years. So for fiscal years 2022 to 2026, we have about $6 million from the federal government. And we do have this parsed out a little bit, so I'll talk to you a little bit how that goes. From off the top, about $900,000 goes right over to our recreational trails program, and that helps put in some of the projects that we have in, say, our state parks and things like that. Then we also have about $965,000 that comes from the state that contributes to our program as well. And then through the projects, we also ask that the sponsors match our funding with non-federal dollars. So there's that for you to know too. So we'll talk about the ways that you can make that match happen. And then the way that our funding gets allocated is divided out first by population zones. So that takes the apportionment of about 59% of that federal funding out already for these dedicated places. As Mike mentioned earlier, WMAPCO manages the Newcastle County area, and they get automatically $1,652,000 for that area, since it has a population zone greater than 200,000. Then we get to determine some areas for like the 50,000 population to 200 population. Here, I'll let you, people, sorry, can't talk and chew gum. We lost their view. Can you get it back?
Hold on. We'll keep going.
I'll
They can
keep
see
going.
us.
We can't see you guys, but I'll keep talking. And then we have another population zone of 5,000 to 50,000 that we dedicate some funding automatically to, about $400,000. And then areas that are more rural, under 5,000 population, we get $550,000. The remaining is about 41% of our funding, which is $2 million. And then we can flex that statewide. So we do have some rules about where we put our money, but then there's still some left over to move around as we see fit. Go to the next one. So who can apply for TAP? So I believe from all the organizations represented here, all of you. So that's good news. Congratulations. But specifically at local governments, municipal governments, the cities, counties, or even state agencies can apply for TAP. Anybody that's serving the public, really. So there's regional transportation authorities, or if we had transit agencies in our state, you could do that. Natural resource managers or public land agencies. So, in Delaware, that's, DENREC kind of manages all those roles, whereas in other states, it might be different agencies. Even school districts are considered our government and for the public good. So, school districts, whether they're public or even not, even nonprofit private schools, I believe that covers like the charter schools, can apply for this too. If there's tribal government, they can apply. And then metropolitan planning organizations with serving areas of a population of 200,000 or less. Nonprofits can apply, whether they own the land that they're putting the project on or not. So even an example of this could be like the AARP could apply. And then any regional or local government entities that are responsible for managing transportation or trails. And then even the state could, or the Delta could apply at the request of an entity, eligible above. We don't really prefer that, so I don't want to focus too much on that, but that is another option there. So what types of projects can apply for funding? So maybe you're talking with your community or your constituents and looking for some project funding to do bike trails or rec trails or put in new sidewalks. Those are all great ideas. But really what we want to have people apply for is projects that serve the public. So they're connecting the public to transportation networks, whether it's a network of transportation or it's right in your town. We want that to be all connected, and it's for a public use, not a private use. So there's lots of categories of this public use, including, on and off-road trail facilities for both pedestrians and bicyclists. That even goes to electric bicyclists now. So safe routes for anybody, all ages, all abilities, folks that are older, little kids, folks with disabilities. We want everybody to be able to get around safely. Other things that we want to provide for are the construction of turnouts and overlooks and viewing areas that enhance our travel areas that we are escorting people to, especially like in tourism cases or in cases of the byways that we have in the state. Even conversion of abandoned or old railroad lines that we don't use anymore, we can convert those to trails with this funding. Other things that this funding covers are community improvements that are related to transportation. But they could also help out with removing, outdoor advertising that's unnecessary now, preserving historic places along our roads, or managing vegetation that might be impairing our roads. So removing invasive species and things like that. There's also other environmental mitigation activities. So preventing pollution or lessening the pollution that's going or coming from our roadways. So this could address stormwater management, or reduce, strikes of wildlife on our roadways, or even connect habitats that have been separated, whether they're terrestrial species or aquatic species. And then the program also covers the Safe Routes to School program, which helps kids get to school safely and walk to school, bike to school, and all those wonderful things. So I'm gonna keep going, and I think I turn back over to you, Mike.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so I'm presuming most, if not all of you, may have searched through the DelDOT announcements, the DelDOT TAP website, or they originated at Wilmapco, which then kicked it over to DelDOT's website for the application. So we'll just cover some of the basics towards that. And again, I'm hoping you all have the links. If not, just send us something in the chat box. Hey, send me the DelDOT TAP links. But essentially, again, make sure you read it all. That's the most fundamental ABC 1, 2, 3s. Just read it all. It's there. Again, we talked about the eligible activities, the project sponsors, and then the TAP application process. Again, we're working with Wilmapco, with Newcastle County TAP submission project. So anything within Newcastle County, can be submitted or should be submitted to WMAPCO. If it's submitted to DelDOT, that's fine, but we're going to forward it over to Heather's group for their initial review, because again, they make the first decisions for the $1.6 billion that's dedicated each federal fiscal year towards Newcastle County projects. And again, so we just want to say the deadline is still September 23rd at midnight, either to Heather's group or to our group. Again, we're going to work in unison with the application process for Newcastle County projects. But anything within Kent and Sussex, submit it to DelDOT. There are a number of disclaimers. I'm sure there might be some questions on that. And again, we went over, at least within the application process, we gave the idea of the project rankings or review information, because again, this is a competitive submission process. So again, we're trying to rank it and prioritize maybe projects that are similar in kind. And again, competitive process, there is the funding process, which we first need to achieve for project selection, just so you all know. The monetary things are probably the most important, at least from DelDOT's consideration. And I think we have a pretty well-diverse audience upon where we might get future application submissions. So, I mean, that's music to our ears on that. So again, within the application process, there are a number of questions in terms of the contacts, the partners or co-partners that you might want to submit your application submission to. There's the project information. Please, describe it. Again, Delaware's small. We can probably figure out a whole bunch of things. But if we don't have all the project information or the contact information, then I'm presuming there's an email, so we can at least contact him or her on that. And again, there's the project selection of qualifying activities, which we kind of went over a little bit. Please check the box in terms of your project implementation. Is it a planning feasibility study first needed? Does it continue into PE, design engineering, or does it go into construction? I think there's a typo. Planning activities, PE engineering, or design. That actually design should be construction. I'm sorry, there's a typo there. I guess we caught ourselves. So again, there's the three activities, but again, if you want a project from start to finish, you're going to click all three boxes. And then there's a certification of the project sponsor. Basically, that's acknowledging all the disclaimers or the knowledge that you've actually read or understand most, if not all of it. Obviously, you're here to ask questions. But again, within our application, we expect the applicant to sign and acknowledge the procedures that are behind everything. So here's some basic fundamentals. So we mentioned this, and again, it is in the application process. We just want to go over the bullets in themselves. They must be dedicated or intended for public use, similar to what Kelly had mentioned, with a surface transportation relationship. There's a link there if anyone has a specific question. But again, the criteria behind everything, and in some discussions, we could get into that later. But just those are federal highways compliance, and we must follow the rules if we need the funding or utilize the funding. Our projects, we're trying to cap everything at $1 million to spread out the wealth. And again, we realize, depending upon the projects, the sponsors can overmatch towards things. And again, we're trying to distribute out the projects as well as WMAPCO. But again, if projects are kind of small and manageable, we can spread out the wealth where we can get as much community transportation projects as possible. Agreements. So let me talk a little bit about that. They must be completed, and then there's a timely fashion. One thing that we did change this year is, should your TAP project be awarded? Now, again, this comes to, we'll say, commitment on the sponsor, or the focus for the sponsor is we're actually looking for a $500, and it's not a contribution, it's not a fee, but it's an early upfront match. It is possible that could be returned back, but again, it just makes sure that the sponsor is with us, because we really want to get these projects on the ground. We want to get it started either in design, or if you're looking for construction funding, again, there's a 20% match, which could be federal, non-federal match 20%, which is typically cash. There are some sponsor agreements which may not be cash contributions. We can get into that a little bit later, I'm sure. But again, we just want to cover the basic highlights or the overalls towards your application. In considering your project, don't try something that might be 5 blocks long. Again, we've had some issues before with that in the past with our TAP project, where we continuously phase things out. Projects like that will have to go through a concept feasibility, which is covered. There's no sponsor match on that. To figure out exactly what you want to do with, say, within that 5 block area, you're going to get 1 block, for instance, depending upon where the funding is and the nature of the project. But again, if there's an effort where we need to phase a project application that was approved, it would only be 1, and then the applicant needs to go back and submit for continued phases. Each project will be independent of itself. So again, we will work with the applicant that was awarded to phase that particular project. But again, if they are smaller, manageable type projects within the $1 million budget, and again, we're trying to spread out the wealth towards things. So that's really our objective, and hopefully that's your objective as well. We do strongly discourage, although we do allow it, sponsored administered projects. I won't go into details on that, but again, what that means is the sponsor's kind of saying, sure, let me do design, I'll pay my engineering company or construction, and then I'll bill DelDOT 20%. There's initial a lot of requirements, federal requirements, that those plans or specifications or the project itself must fit. So again, I go into the agreements. DelDOT, our program is a turnkey operation with the projects that are selected. Again, I just mentioned Newcastle County, Heather Dunnigan from WMAPCO and the folks from WMAPCO. Well, I mentioned it already, but you can still submit to DelDOT. I don't need to repeat that again. And so in terms of other content, basic fundamentals, the Safe Routes to School program, it is under the TAP program. It used to be under its own program, and it is now officially, well, it has been for a couple years, Safe Routes to School. And again, we're trying to give a little bit more love towards things. And again, there's other eligibility requirements under the Safe Routes. But again, we might look towards a 0% sponsor match. Again, that's DelDOT's internal policies of what we're trying to achieve. So just so folks know, if a project is fully applicable to Safe Routes, there could be a 0% match, sponsor match. Yep. Okay, a couple other do's and don'ts or just heads up on. If there's utilities, significant utilities, or proposals to vary utilities as part of the project, DelDOT or the TAP program does not participate in that. Typically, and again, I'm sure there might be some questions on this, the maintenance of and the legal liability of the project is normally, and I say normally, assigned to the project sponsor. Now, sidewalks and DelDOT right away, which is part of DelDOT asset, they're probably going to end up being DelDOT's. So again, there are certain components, since there's a wide range of TAP projects. Again, a lot of the landscaping provisions probably are going to be back on the project sponsor. Just want to mention that the TE funds to finance normal environmental mitigation work eligible under the federal aid highway program doesn't apply. So if there are submissions like that, we'll consult with our federal highways on the application to see whether it does or not apply. We mentioned, and Chip will mention it and go over a little bit, and we'll allow WMAPCO to speak too on their projects ranks and prioritization. And again, a lot of these things might be ranked or prioritized against similar like projects. Anything that you want to provide letters of support within your TAP application, or support or colleagues from the council, the mayor, the public, that always does help. And again, with your application, we encourage any sponsors or co-sponsors towards things, just so there is a greater partnership going on with acceptance of the project and for implementation. So project examples, we're going to zip through this quickly because my throat's getting tired. No, I'm just kidding. So just to give everyone a perspective, a flavor, these are more recent TAP projects. This is the town of Hartley in Kent County. This basically was a sidewalk ADA compliance, number of crossings, and there was a number of missing gap link connections. And I realize your screen is very small there, but again, that was a two-phase project. This is the first phase, probably the most significant portion of it. But again, a very successful project, we thought, that has been completed for the town of Hartley. Slaughter Beach Overlook. This was another great project we had. Again, there were parking improvements for this overlooks within the town of Slaughter Beach. There are crossing measures, which you can see on your lower left-hand side. Interpretive panels, you can kind of see that. Well, there's lookout areas. Interpretive panels. Oh yeah, they're on that upper left slide. I guess the editing took it out. But again, interpretive panels with a project, ADA accessible measures, a kiosk again, since this was on the Delaware Bayshore Byway, the town of Slaughter Beach, the informational booth right there, and as well as bike racks. So again, that's surface transportation because it has a number of transportation components behind it, and it's really a great scenic overlook type project. Another example is water quality or stormwater runoff improvement. This is the Anchorage Pond in South Bethany. The picture on the lower screen is the before, and then the top screen, I guess I should have gone in unison. So the picture should have switched, but regardless, this was kind of like the concept plan. There were pedestrian crossing measures. There were bikeway improvements since we took a transportation roadway surface slip ramp kind of on the north side where it says parking. You can kind of see that Sea Colony. That was converted into a bike path itself from off the shoulder. And again, very successful project. It improved a lot of stormwater or natural runoff along our roadways into a treatment system before they went into the inland bays. So again, that's stormwater management or stormwater runoff improvement along with transportation components. Another idea that we do maybe with streetscapes, or they can be their own, are rain gardens or bump outs, crossings. A lot of them are being done in the city of Wilmington, hopefully in your community as well. So again, we can do some brick patterns because again, our project isn't necessary, or our program isn't necessarily a maintenance. I want to repair my sidewalks. There should be some level of enhancement because that's what the program's all about. So again, there could be very delicate things behind it, as well as improvements to crossings. So something very simple. Another example, town of Ocean View. We had permeable sidewalk. Along the driveways though, the driveways are concrete, but the sidewalks where the grassy sections are the permeable sidewalk. And again, it's ADA compliant, 5 foot wide. There's a buffer there from the roadway. Very good project. Safe Route to School program. This was just completed. This is in Newark. This is Downs Elementary. We instituted a mid-block crossing. There was travel striping for traffic calming, or delineation of the roadway a little bit better for at least trying to calm the traffic. With the idea is that there'd be pedestrian safety improvements behind it. And there's a bunch of warning signages all along the school itself. Again, a very small project, but Safe Route to School, very successful type project. So Chip wants to go into.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about project selection factors. I'm going to try to run through this fairly quickly too. I think that the main takeaway should be that, all the things that we just talked about in terms of what's eligible, if that's a part of your project, get it in your application. Make sure you highlight whether it's an ADA improvement, enhancement, visual enhancement, whatever part of the project, however it qualifies, make sure you highlight all that in your application. But so some of the things that we look at, and these all have like somewhat different weights and they're all considered a little bit differently, but of course, equity and the community that it's serving. Safety improvements, certainly if there is a history of pedestrian or bicycle crashes, certainly fatalities, things like that, that's something we really take into consideration. ADA improvement needs all across the board. The history of requests for improvements from community members, again, going back to the application process, if there's letters of support from council or community members, citizens out there, bring that in. If it's part of another larger strategic plan or spending plan, that's something we look at. Again, also like connections. So if there's a gap between two pedestrian or bicycle areas, we want to look at that as well. Proximity to like areas of interest, libraries, schools, community centers, transit, anything like that. That's certainly a ranking factor. Oh, yeah, parks as well. So that like covers those 5 bullet points. Something we really consider too is that it's an enhancement effort, more than just a replacement or maintenance effort. So, because the sidewalks may be degraded and you just want to get it repaved or reconcreted exactly as it was. I mean, we're really looking to improve the look, feel, and encourage people to walk or bike more than maybe they were in the past through, and just improve the look of the community. So consider that. Connections or ranking improvements under level of bike stress or pedestrian accessibility. That's something we have in-house here that we look at. We rank bike stress and from like 1 to 5. So if this project would bring level of stress from a 5 down to a 3 or a 3 down to a 1, something like that, that would be something we consider in the ranking. And the air pollution, wildlife mortality, or water treatment, runoff stuff, also something we would be interested in factoring in. Yeah, same as the level. So just kind of a continuation, things that we also look at. The particular stage of the project development. So if this is just like a fresh idea, this wouldn't like negate or disallow you from being a part of the program. But if you already have a concept plan, that's awesome, right? So we're into that. If it's a next phase or continuation of a previous TAP project or some other transportation enhancement project, that's certainly a factor. Whether it relates to the Safe Routes to School program or the Delaware Byways program, that's a bonus. We talked about categories, population categories, whether you're in an MPO or an environmental justice area, that's certainly a factor. Available funding and overmatch. If you've got a project and you've got at least the match, we want to know that. But things could, we might look favorably upon somebody who's willing to overmatch to make a bigger, better project. That was the case with Downs, where we only had so much money allotted and the city of Newark wanted to do more. So they actually provided more money than the 20%. Again, documented community acceptance, particularly this adjacent property owners, we really love to see this, where, maybe somebody's got an idea for an improvement and we start in on like concept planning and we get out there to the public and nobody wants it in their front yard. Please do some of that legwork in advance. If there's any way of documenting it, that's great too. But, knowing that the adjacent property owners that are going to be directly affected by the project are on board is a really big help for us right up front. Complexity of maintenance, this is something that we would consider and or the sponsor should consider. Constructability, that's something we can, kind of take a cursory look at when we get the application. But we can also flush a lot of that out through the concept planning. The tourism or ecotourism effort towards preservation and promotion or economic benefit, serving the greater good. This kind of goes back to where, we're looking at what the population is and things like that. And any relation to, like I said before, any relation to an existing project. So sometimes, if we know like a pave and rehab is coming through, so the street's going to get repaved, well, that's a great time to actually take a look at the pedestrian and the bicycle needs to maybe revamp things a little bit, because generally pave and rehab just comes in, repaves, puts things back basically the way they were. But if we're going to go into construction, we can tag on. We did that with the city of Newark as well through Main Street, and we got a lot of good stuff out of that, bump outs and crosswalks and things like that. So all factors that we like to see. So if any of these apply, make sure you know, or make sure you let us know. So, some of these things are quantitative, other of them are a little more subjective or qualitative. And a lot of this is just based on our past experience. So we just have an idea, but we still go through a process. Proposed project submissions are given a final technical score and evaluation write-up if it's a quantitative measure. And then this information is shared and may be reviewed and concurred by the DELDOT other planning management. And of course, if there's an MPO, if it's within an MPO area, we'll share that with them. So that's a really quick, I know I kind of rushed through that. I know that's like a really quick overview of how we rank things. But now that you've got your application, so when and how does that happen? We're kind of figuring on like a 30 to 45 day review before we notify applicants who's been awarded. The projects that are reviewed by WMAPCO, I'll let them speak on that in just a minute, maybe at the end of this slide. They do their own ranking and prioritization, so that may happen sooner or later, I'm not sure. But you'll get an indication letter one way or the other. And prior to all the ranking, we certainly might reach out to the applicant if there are questions. If something's unclear, we're not sure about something, we may reach out for clarification. At the same time, if you guys have any questions during the application process, we're here to help you make it the best application you can. So certainly don't hesitate to reach out if you get to a question or a part of it, you're like, well, I don't know if it really qualifies as stormwater management, or I don't know if this is really a safety improvement effort. Ask us, let us know, and we'll walk you through it. So, and the last bullet point is just saying, certain elements could be eligible for acceptance in the program. So that would be like, we're not, if it's Bikepad or enhancement, but maybe this is like you're also looking at like changing the way an intersection operates for cars only. That's not necessarily something that would be eligible. So if it's all a larger project, we might pull out pieces of it to say these elements are eligible, but these aren't. So with that, I wanted to open the floor to WMAPCO, Heather, or anyone. If you guys wanted to talk about, for those people within your area, the ranking process that you go through, how it differs, or?
Yep, absolutely. So, and I have an echo. But our process for the TAP, it'll probably also be about a 45-day review. We're also at the same time frame accepting applications for the statewide Bikepad funding pool. Once we get the applications for both programs, they're going to go and be prioritized by our staff. And we look at a variety of factors, including the connection to land use destinations, so where it is in terms of proximity to schools, libraries, parks, community centers, and other important destinations. We look at transportation elements, such as, is it a project that's connecting a gap in the existing bicycle pedestrian network? Is it close to a bus stop or train station? Is it in an area where there's a high number of bicycle and pedestrian crashes? And then we look at some demographics, such as the density of land use and jobs in the area, as well as environmental justice factors. And so from there, we share that prioritization with our non-motorized transportation working group, our TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, and our council. And then they'll approve the prioritization of the projects, which we submit to DelDOT. Concurrent to that, DelDOT's going to be doing an internal review on their own of the projects, just to make sure that they're reasonable projects and that they would be implementable and all that. The statewide bicycle pedestrian pool projects do have a little bit of additional review by DelDOT, and they actually do a quantitative analysis to look at how many houses are connected to how many destinations to really delve down specific benefits of the project. Because we're really looking for strong transportation projects that make connections.
Great, thanks, Heather.
And I'll also add, you may have a project that's larger than $1 million, or you may have a project that might be TAP eligible, but might be better funded elsewhere. Feel free to share that information with us, because the applications we get, if it's not TAP that's the best program, we'll try and work with DelDOT to find out the best home for it.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I know there was a question there about railroad crossings, and I know that there's a separate DelDOT or FHWA funding program. So that project may not be itself a TAP qualified, but at least we might be able to guide. And I think, Sam, that was probably your question towards that. So there is a separate program, a separate pool of funding. So if it's not TAP, it's definitely going to be something else.
Yeah, and to that point, sometimes it doesn't require a 20% match. I'm not sure.
Exactly.
But yeah, sometimes there are better options.
Just quickly add, the projects coming to WMAPCO, the application for the Bikepad funding pool is really just like a one-page thing. So I would encourage people who are applying for TAP within Newcastle County to apply for both. And you can also just apply for the Bikepad funding pool if a match is a challenge for you on the TAP program, or you go through the application and you just feel like you don't have all the information. Go ahead and submit for the Bikepad funding pool. The Bikepad funding pool is a little bit more robustly funded than the TAP program. So the projects we're looking to fund from that are maybe in the $2 to $4 million range, or $1 to $4 million range. So it's a little bit more money. For both programs, I will warn everybody in advance that there's not a lot of money. So we really are looking for the strongest candidate projects.
This is Sam. If I'm understanding you, then you're saying I should go ahead and apply for TAP. And if my project doesn't meet TAP requirements, you'll forward it to someone else.
Yes.
Then you're okay. Thank you.
But you know, if you have questions on eligibility, you can always reach out to Mike or myself in advance, just to you don't necessarily want to go through the application process if it's just not at all qualifying. For instance, if it's a recreation project, in the beginning of October, DENRIC has the Outdoor Recreation Parks and Trails Grant Program. That's great for funding park and recreational trail projects. And I can drop a link to that into the chat.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. So once the applications are in, getting projects underway. So if accepted, right, this is kind of what happens. We would anticipate the $500 contribution that Mike discussed earlier. We'll have an agreement. We'll execute an agreement just on design. Later on, after design's done, we would do an agreement for construction that covers like actual maintenance responsibilities and things like that. But the agreement on design, we're actually starting something new where we're going to have like a timeline on that as well. A 90-day, we would like to see that fully executed. Beyond that, we might look to other projects that were not accepted just because they were bumped out for funding purposes. Generally speaking, we would start within 2 to 3 months of feasibility, concept planning. we use open-end consulting, we use in-house services to develop, manage some of that stuff. And this is an interesting, although discouraged, it is possible to come with your own consultant. We consider that like a
In-kind match.
yeah, like an in-kind match. But if that's something you're really interested in, we can talk about it. And then the full design and construction is where the 20% match comes in. So I don't know if this actually said the concept planning, the initial feasibility concept planning that we take out to the public and work with you on is 100% funded. So other than the $500 initial contribution, there's no match required at that point. So we develop concept plans. Maybe we provide a couple alternatives that meet the needs of the project. Take that out to the public, get feedback, and determine kind of a path forward on what we're actually going to design and build. That whole process is fully covered by DelDOT. So the design construction is where the 20% match comes in. That can be done in those two pieces. So there you have it. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I'll just say, again, the way that the TAP projects are is it's a turnkey operation. There are other opportunities which we'll get into. Hopefully you all have questions. But I guess in the spirit of Halloween, although I know we're 2 months away, I just thought if you all saw this Saturday Night Live skit, are there any questions? So and I know that there was a bunch flying down on the screen, but.
So, yeah, I'll go back to that first one that we had come up. I hope y'all can hear me still. I think Anne Marie asked this one. So what transit costs are eligible? Can we do bus purchases? And I think there was a feedback in the chat that, pedestrian connections and bus stops is more the things that we can kind of go to. I don't know if you want to comment more about that one.
So I don't think so, because in that, I think it's provisions of sidewalks or bus shelters. But not necessarily the motorized vehicle operations.
Yeah.
I didn't remember ever seeing within the TAP guidance, and I don't know if Rebecca Liederbaum from FHWA, she said she was going to join us. I don't know if she's on, but we'll check into the buses, but I don't believe buses themselves would contribute as being motorized transportation. The infrastructure to get you on a bus would be.
The next question was from Sam about the railroad crossings. Can you do repairs or improvements around those for pedestrians or, ADA or auto safety? And then I think that was saying that that was going over a DelDOT maintained street too.
Yeah. So there is a separate railroad grade operation program within DelDOT. I actually saw it more recently, so we can direct Sam to that on that. But if there are pedestrian improvements leading up to it, that would most likely, if not all, would qualify under a TAP program.
Another question that came up twice, I think, was what are other sources of match? Can you use in-kind services like volunteer hours or other things? Okay,
so this is kind of tricky. Again, there would have to be negotiations or preset agreements, and there are timelines on that. For instance, say the town wanted to say, well, we have our own engineer towards things. The town is going to bill or commission the work. Now, again, there would have to be agreements because, again, if it's in the public right of way, there's certain DelDOT standards or specifications that need to be done. There's certain timelines and there's ADA requirements that would be approved, as well as stormwater management would also have to be approved, or at least concurrence for approval within our organization. So it's kind of an inter cooperation towards things, but essentially the town would use their own town engineer and they're paying them. And again, there have to be proposals. Don't say, hey, I've already engineered my plan and now I want to get I've already done my 20% because I paid my engineering folks. No. You start with us first. So again, the town would be paying their consultant 20%, I'm sorry. They would submit their bills after they pay, and then they would get reimbursed 80%. Because the town, their 20%, that is their sponsorship. It's not, you don't have to wait until the end of the project. We would anticipate like monthly invoices. There might have been a question or a concern about that, like, do we wait till the end of the project to get reimbursed? No, not necessarily. It's sponsor as you go, or pay your, or offer your 20%. There is some in-kind services in terms of work that you may put towards the project. The question is, well, what type of work? And then we'd have to work with probably the state or federal guidelines about who someone's salary is, and then whether or not their contribution towards the project, whatever it may be, would qualify. So yes, it is possible your contribution, your effort, or the town's effort, whoever it might be. But again, that's going to get tricky. That's where we get into the agreements towards things. And if we all can't necessarily agree towards things, then we have a problem with it. And if it carries on so much, we realize this may not be a very workable or viable project. We know that there are other applications which may be viable towards things where other arrangements have been worked out. So again, we want to work with all the projects, but I know it has not been really entertained or focused on. And I know before in the past, there always were issues with, well, here's my volunteer hours and I'm putting a dollar value to it. And that's going to be part of my 20% match. It's going to be tricky, but yes, it is possible.
It's just proven difficult in the past. We put it simply, we really prefer cash. I think everybody does.
Yeah. Yeah.
But an alternative, or going back to the sources question, a lot of projects are somewhat or partially sponsored through CTF funds, community transportation funds. Those are sometimes available. I don't want to say always, but you know, those are funds that you can request from your legislator if they're in support of the project. Your legislator is given a certain amount of money to dispose on transportation specific projects. And that money is eligible to be used towards match. That's a good option if you're not, you're unincorporated, you have no money because you're not a municipality, or that's just an option.
All right, another question that we had was, can a project include public access to a private site's internal network if it connects to the DELDOT right away? And that was from Jared Hoffman. So connecting to a private internal sidewalk network, getting the public there.
No, I don't believe so. But at least with, I don't know about TAP prop.
I mean, it might, because if you're doing a sidewalk within public right of way, all the adjacent properties are probably ended up private. Jared, do you want to turn your microphone on and clarify a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So some of the connection issues that DART notices is that somebody's, apartment building will be right next to the sidewalk, but there's something in the way. Like there's trees in the way, there's a ditch in the way, or just something's preventing them from easily accessing the sidewalk. So if we had a connection from DELDOT's sidewalk into that, like broke through that barrier and got into that neighborhood, is that possible?
So I'm going to say it probably is possible, but that area would have to be dedicated for public use, whatever that easement may be.
Gotcha.
It can't be private, where all of a sudden, they put up a sign to say residents only.
Yeah.
And then put a gate there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a different funding source, I know, but with the Safety Lou, what Safe Routes was previously funded through, if we could do stuff for a private school, but we couldn't do anything on their property. So everything stopped at the edge of the right of way.
Unless there's an agreement between the property owner?
Yeah, I imagine it could be done if it makes sense, where we would get like a permanent easement. If we were willing to take on that and it would be dedicated as a permanent easement and serve the general public that way. It's possible. Yeah, it's hard to say, I guess, right? But
All right, thanks.
Yep. So
I guess
What
next
else we
question
have?
is, can we apply for construction of a project that was already having a completed design?
I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say yes, but again, it depends what the construction is and then where the improvements are within the public right of way. For any DelDOT specifications or ADA compliance standards that would be required under use of federal dollars.
All right, next question.
Does that make sense? I think that was Anne Marie.
Yes.
If she's still on.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think we're striving to meet those standards anyway, so I don't think that would be an issue, but we've got something that will be
Yeah, so
construction ready soon.
So again, there would be some level of review. There'd obviously be the agreement. Hopefully, nothing really necessarily changes with the plans. Anything in DelDOT right away is done to our standards or specifications, but again, they could be construction-only projects. They could be design-only projects. It could be concept planning, like I'm not really sure where I'm coming up with the funding just yet, but hey, how much is this streetscape improvement for this planning measure that I have in my comprehensive plan? Like, we want to know, like, how, now again, the information, once it's there, how long does it sit before it gets outdated? But again, planning efforts or concept planning efforts are its own eligibility under TAP to get you the non-motorized transportation improvements. So either planning, concept planning, feasibility, design or design engineering, or construction, or all of them.
Great. How about Rob Pierce's question? Can a jurisdiction submit multiple requests, and if so, should we indicate our priorities?
Yes, so yes, you can apply, Rob. I think you are applying already for 2, if I'm not mistaken. That's not inside information for the rest of the folks. Those are tons of emails that I get towards things. I'm like, apply TAP, apply TAP, apply TAP. So I know probably from you all, we anticipate 2. I think the city of Lewis, Anne Marie, River had it. You guys are applying for more than 1 too. So again, if you wanted to rank or prioritize them, that would be helpful.
And then Anne Marie, I guess, I don't know if that was a
At least
follow-up
2
or.
for Anne Marie.
Yeah.
Okay.
She said, if a planning effort is funded, is there a way to go back for construction dollars before 2026?
Planning effort is funded. So the planning effort is just a planning effort. So then you have to go back to the TAP pool, call for applications on a competitive basis to go for the next sequence. It's not automatically the next phase unless you're putting down all boxes for it.
Right, but this was put out as 22 to 26. So if we get a design funded in this cycle, will there be an opportunity to apply for TAP funds for implementation before 2026?
is there going to be another call for projects?
Did I miss it? Did I misunderstand? Because I thought I saw somewhere that this said 22 to 26.
Well, that's the fiscal year for the current federal funding. So that's under the transportation bill. That's kind of the fixed amount of what we know under this program. So after 26, the program funding, knock on wood, gets signed and authorized with increased funds. But that's what we know is per federal fiscal year. So depending upon the number of projects we take and how quick they move, and because we actually do have a number of projects already existing in the queue, we have to kind of like play, I wouldn't say the shell game, but we have to watch the funding about how much money is being spent per federal fiscal year and our state contributions towards it, because again, we're maxed out on it.
So all the funding will not be allocated immediately. It'll be allocated on an annual basis with the fiscal years, not all 5 years at once.
Correct.
Okay. That, now I get it. Sorry.
It's each per
Yeah, I
fiscal
would
year.
say, put, if you want a project, you're starting at the design phase, you want it to check all of the boxes because,
Yep.
our goal is to get things built. And so we know it's coming. And generally speaking, we try and get the projects, to that construction phase within, 3 or 4 years. But sometimes it slides, sometimes there's, another project that maybe needs it to slide, but, we want to just know what your intent is, and we'll continue work with you on a continuing basis to line up all the match funds.
So you want to check all the boxes.
But whether there's another call for projects in the next 5 is kind of dependent on how this round shakes out, right?
Well, I mean, ideally, depending upon things, I would love to make a call for projects every year, but again, it depends how much these things are going to be. We got our existing TAP programs in. So maybe every other year, we would probably end up doing a new call for projects. Depends upon how quickly the money is spent or is being spent, and then the need for new projects to get them in the queue. We
For the
definitely have,
Newcastle County side, we do aim to have a call for projects, if not every year, then at least every other year. So if there's no TAP money, we might leave that one out, but we would have a call for the statewide bicycle pedestrian funding pool program at least every year.
so that it's approximately $6.1 million per federal fiscal year. $695,000 in state contributions per state fiscal year. So yeah, that number grows. And again, that's why we're doing a call for projects. We want these things done. And again, we do have a number of projects already in the queue. So again, we're looking for maybe, it all depends upon what type of projects. Realistically, I'm gonna shoot for the sky. I'll just throw it out there. Hey, we want to approve 5 or 6 projects. That includes the Wilmacco projects. We'll just say overall the program. But it all depends what they are and then how much it consumes the fiscal year each year towards things before we put a call out, because you can start a construction project, Anne Marie, on one fiscal year, divide that out per next fiscal year, federal fiscal year. So just say the project is $1 million. It's not $1 million. It could be 500,000 and then 500,000 for the fiscal year, depending upon the timing. So it's kind of like the dates of sequence with funding. And that's really DelDOT to help manage. But again, we've never been told, and again, things kind of slowed down a little bit, but we've never been told, hey, you're spending too much money. We have to put this one on the queue. But if we accept all these projects and then we already have a number of projects already in the queue, then we have to be conscientious, because again, we're only getting limited amount of funding per our program.
Anne Marie followed up and said, so can we submit an application for planning, design, and build in one application?
As long as you're checking all boxes: concept, design, construction.
Yeah, when he says checking the boxes, right on the application, there's like what you're applying for, and there's concept, design, and construction. That's like right on towards the beginning of the application.
And then you just have to be careful that the projects don't go over $1 million unless you're willing to do some overmatch.
Or we're going to help you
Parse out.
Yeah.
We'll say, omit of several items, depending upon the prioritization.
Narrow it down. I think that's all the questions in the chat. Is there anyone else that just wants to come off mute and ask a question directly?
Clear as mud?
I just want to add a note on the very large projects and the very small projects. So on the very large projects, in the past, DelDOT has worked with the applicants to divide the project into phases that were kind of manageable within the various money. And so I know there have been some projects, within the state that have, been like such and such project phase 6, and the applicant hasn't needed to reapply again. Just in order to have geographic fairness to the funding, we can work with you to phase a project certainly on the Newcastle County side, to fit your first phase in. If it's something that's going to require multiple phases for construction, we will ask you to reapply for those subsequent phases. And then on the very small projects, it does cost more to implement a project through the TAP program or really any federally funded program. There's additional bureaucratic hoops you have to jump through, or Delta has to jump through. And so if you have a very small project, you may want to go after community transportation funds or use municipal funding to get it done, because it'll probably be cheaper for you to do it that way.
Faster.
Other questions or ideas you want to run by us?
Yes,
Hi, this is Tess. I raised my hand.
Hey, Tess. Sorry,
Hey.
didn't pop up. Thanks.
No worries. I know you have a lot of people on here. So I have a former colleague from the Cesar Rodney School District who has been desperately trying to get on, and he keeps getting kicked off.
No.
Is that Todd?
It's
Hello.
the Todd. Yeah, there you are, Todd. I was just
here.
getting ready to double check. I told him you guys would probably share the webinar after this is over with him or with everybody who signed up.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, Todd, you sent a request, I think it was either yesterday or 2 days ago. I'm like, yes, my first school, or our first school district. Uh-oh.
That's an encouraging response. So if I could, after I watch the webinar, would it be possible to kind of set up a quick Zoom with somebody with any questions that I probably will have, since it's a unique situation in a innovative school district doing some really unique things on a public school campus.
Absolutely, and that probably goes for everyone also on the, still on the call, or still on this webinar too.
Okay,
So-
and is this Chip Knievel? I'm sorry, I don't know who I'm talking to.
No, it's Mike on. Chip Knievel's this man right here.
Yeah, I'm here as well. Yeah, we're definitely available.
Okay, I can't even see on my phone. Wait, I don't even know how to use this thing. Okay, I will wait for the webinar. I think Tess has my email for sure. And then I'll just go ahead and give you a contact, I guess, one of you two guys with any further questions, as I'm hopeful we get there's a possibility here.
Right, yeah, please.
Thank you.
Other question in the chat is, do prevailing wages apply?
Yes. So I'm also going to say Buy America also applies too. The question, well, internal DelDOT questions was raised. So some of these bike repair stations, they actually do apply for TAP. So do e-bicycles, the infrastructure for it. That was new for the guidance. So prevailing wages, yes, in terms of construction, but also the products that you buy, at least the steel or metals, it's Buy America. So that's directly from the federal regulations. So I think we addressed that question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we got to thank you. Is that Kathy Smith from DART?
Any other questions or ideas you want to suss out? Yeah, we can always schedule calls or separate meetings afterwards.
I just
Yeah.
want to thank you for the meeting. Appreciate all the information. Found it very useful.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sam.
You're welcome.
I agree, thank you.
Thank Wilmaco for being here
Yeah,
to field questions on their end too. We really appreciate that.
and we have our other NPOs, got to give a shout out to them as well.
Sorry, I'm not trying to.
That's okay. They are actually an eligible applicant to apply for TAP funding. Again, they can't use federal funds with federal funds, but again, they are eligible to apply. We do want to work with you guys, depending upon who's going to be the applicant or sponsor with projects that are under the Kent County Dover MPO, as well as the Salisbury, which includes, I guess, Laurel, Seaford, and Blades and Delmar area on that. Again, there is the funding table requirements based on populations. I know you guys kind of have your technical committees and you come up with project ideas and so forth. So hopefully some of those project ideas, I think we do have one from the town of Smyrna, which was, I think, Maryland identified under your non-motorized improvements. So again, we do want to work with the other MPOs, even though they do not have a direct hand in the project decision or selection like Wilmacco does. But just to let you guys know, we're willing to work with you guys and we want to work with you guys. Again, assuming you're not the one with the application being the sponsor, because that would be considered conflict of interest.
Mike, thanks for mentioning that. This is Marilyn. Thanks for mentioning that, because as we've talked in the past, we have been looking at our MTP and projects that have studies that have been recently completed and some work that the different municipalities have been doing. And just so that the folks in Kent County know, we have provided those as potential projects for Mike and the team to consider. But we also, you know, if a municipality is considering a project or a school district, shout out to our friends at Cesar Rodney, because we haven't worked with the school districts before in any degree at all. So we certainly would like to work with you on those projects and see how, you know, just make sure that we are thinking about connectivity issues with other projects that we may be aware of. So I just want to throw that in the mix for all of our folks in Kent County.
Thank you very much. This is again, Cesar Rodney over here. I really appreciate that. And hopefully, again, a little bit more about our program will help me flesh out the ideas and be more education based versus I'm going to assume most of the other projects are coming from other organizations that are not obviously public schools. So I'm looking forward to
so Todd, I'm going to just put my email in the chat, and you are more than welcome to connect with me as you continue to work on your project.
Okay, and I'm talking to
Marilyn Smith at the MPO.
Awesome, thank you.
So any other thoughts, questions?
Everybody's ready for lunch?
Yeah, again, we are here till 1, but if everyone feels satisfied with everything, you know, that's fine. Again, we're here, we can send this out, the PowerPoint presentation slides to everyone that at least participated or initially signed up. There might have been a number of folks that signed up, but joined later or were unable to join us. So I don't know who it is with keeping track. So everyone's going to get it.
Yeah.
And then we'll get the recording, which might take us another day or two, and also send that out as well.
Yeah, we can put it on the website too. So
That's true.
Yeah.
We'll probably end up doing that and then letting you know. Anything else from Wilmacco for the TAP applications?
No, I just want to thank everybody who came today. I think we got some great questions, and thank you, Delbat folks, for organizing this webinar discussion, because it's always helpful to have a chance to chat a little bit more informally with people, either in a group setting or individually, to just flesh out ideas before the applications come in. So thank you all for attending. Feel free to reach back out to me for Newcastle County projects. And I look forward to seeing what you guys have.
great. Well, we're gonna stay on. I think we had somebody that wanted to keep talking, so you guys are feel free to stay or go. We can.
Probably stop recording.
Yeah, we'll start recording. How about
Yeah.
we do that? Yeah. But thank you all for joining. We're really excited to hear from everyone about your projects. And yeah, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or ideas that you want to run by us. So thanks again and have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
We're staying
Thank
on.
you.
Yep. Who was it that wants
Thank you all.
Todd.
Thank you.
Cesar Rodney wants
It's
to.
Todd here.
Hey,
I'm
Todd.
gonna stop recording.
I'm just gonna step outside. Hopefully I don't lose you because it's team.